Hi everyone, welcome back to Creatively Crafted Life. This is Melanie and today I am bringing you a card process video featuring what I'm calling alcohol ink stained glass. So in order to make this card, I'm using this heat resistant acetate and I've trimmed it down to the size of a card front. And in order for you to see things a little bit clearly, I'm just going to leave the backing paper behind there. Just for handling purposes, etc. I'm using this stamp set from, I believe it was Mama Elephant. Yeah. And I am going to use my anti-static tool very liberally across this acetate panel because acetate has a tendency to be staticky, and so embossing powder will stick everywhere. So I'm using Versamark and my stamp press or Misty just to get a good impression. And a stamp positioning tool is really helpful when using acetate because acetate tends to slip or can slip if you're not careful. So I am going to emboss this with a black embossing powder. I'm using this from Stampendous. It's a detailed black. And you'll see here that most of it comes off fairly easily, and that is because I use the anti-static tool. So we're going to give it a couple flicks. I'm just checking now to make sure there's no stray bits. Because this is black embossing powder, you really don't want it anywhere where it shouldn't be. So I'm going to use these little clips just to hold the plastic to the paper backing and also to give me a place to hold on to this as I'm heating this. Now, while it is heat resistant, you don't want to hold your heat gun in one spot for too long, just to avoid warping if possible. So you'll see I'm moving it quite a bit around versus if I were just doing this on cardstock stock, I would just place it in one place until the embossing powder melted and then move on to the next part. So now I'm just trying to, while it's still warm, make sure it's laying nice and flat. At least that's my plan. And now I'm just going to tape this down to my craft sheet, and I'm just using some washi tape to adhere that to the sheet so that I've got a somewhat stable area to work on. We're going to zoom in, and I'm using Ranger alcohol inks, and I'm just showing you the different colors here. So some pinks, reds, oranges, or not oranges, pinks and reds and yellows and greens, and then like an aqua color. So the idea behind this is that I want to apply the alcohol ink in the wells formed by the embossing powder, right? And I do have a paintbrush to just kind of move it around a little bit and pick up any excess. I am using a paper towel just to blot wherever I need to. Just to, kind of, what's the right word? Pick up any excess amounts that are pooling as well as anything that leaks out of the bottle. I am using a heat tool here just to allow it to dry a little bit quicker. And realize that, what's the right word? When you're using alcohol inks on acetate, what am I trying to say? It will move. It will move is basically what I'm trying to say. And if it doesn't move, you can use your paintbrush to move it along, which is what I'm doing here. Now, I'm not filling this in completely because I want to add another color. And when you add another color, it will push the color you already have down away, right? So you'll see for the amount that I put in there, it's pushing the darker green all the way down towards the edges of the leaf. So it doesn't really blend per se unless you help it to blend, if that makes sense. So here I'm adding a little bit more of that green back in, and it's like a really what's the right word? It's really hard to get this to work exactly the way that you want to. Like, you have to give up some of the control, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It is not a precise application. So yeah, don't try not to stress too much about it. So I got some green in that little leaf there. The leaf layer, part of the petal. I'm not going to worry about it because once I add the next color on it, it's going to push it away anyways. I did clean my paintbrush using some blending solution just to make sure that when I add the green into the red here that I don't create mud. So I'm using some red and some pink to get some varied shades. The idea is that the red hopefully will appear darker than the pink. And then I'm just pushing that around, filling in wherever it needs to be filled. And again, just in between each, using the heat tool to hopefully cause the evaporation process to go a little faster and dry it a little bit quicker. See, I'm really hoping to try and get some blending here, and all it's doing is it's just making the whole rose look red instead of pink. So it is what it is. Just keep that in mind. Whatever you do and lay down, the other color is going to push it away. So don't worry about it too much. It is very forgiving. So if you do mess up, again, like I said, you can just add the other color and it'll push it away and you can continue on from there. So for this last rose, I'm going to use yellow and red, I believe, or pink. I think it's yellow and red. And we do get some mixing going on here so that it is going to look more orange, which is kind of cool. But you don't get the shading like you would get like if you painted or use a marker, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So this is a much looser look. So here you can see where I'm trying to add it at the tips, and then I realize it's not going to work. So I'm just adding it wherever. Just going to town. You know, no real method to my madness. You can see though that the color is quite a bit different than the one at the top where I used the red and the pink. This one definitely looks a little more orangier, but it's not different enough, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So we're going to add some yellow back in. And really, I think what you need to do is try and control how much you add. So the tiniest drops, and then just let it do its thing and just let it be. I think that's the most effective way of doing this technique, I guess, for lack of a better term. So I'm really liking how that last flower turned out. Again, like I said, don't overwork it, just let it be as it is, and that's really the key to your success. So for the background, I am using this pool color to simulate the glass that would fill in the background of the piece of stained glass. And all I'm doing is just going around the outline and in and amongst the leaves. So wherever there is a blank spot, just filling it in. I'm trying to go for a somewhat smooth application. So the best thing to do in this case is just lay it down and try not to go back over it. When you do, it will bloom a little bit. So just, again, like I said, just lay it down and let it do its thing. Now, when you are going in and filling in the little pieces in between the flowers, just be careful how much you apply. You want to be very careful, or you get something like that happens. Basically, I overfilled one section and it jumped over the embossing powder and caused the red to totally push out, but not a big deal. I just dried it all up a little bit and then added some more red back in there, and that seemed to have done the trick. and I'm pretty happy with how that is. I do want to give this some time to dry, and so I'm going to move that off my desk, and I'm going to take this die set that's got like a scalloped edge and then a straight edge, and I'm going to create a frame. So again, if you thinking along the lines of a stained glass window, you have the glass piece usually surrounded by the window frame, and so that's what I'm trying to simulate here. And look at me, I'm being very daring. I did not even tape that down. I probably should have. It would have taken less time than me fussing around with it. I am using black cardstock to make the frame to coordinate with the black embossing powder used in the floral piece. So now I'm just gonna kind of test it out and see if I like the way that looks, and hopefully I've got enough coverage there. So I did flip it over, and I liked that better, and I think it will also protect it a little bit because now where all the ink is will be against the card base. And there is a little bit of warping, but not bad, like not a whole lot. And actually the warping works, I think, to the card's advantage. So I trim this down so that the frame will cover the entire piece. And again, I still have that white backing paper there just so you can see the image a little bit better. Without that, it's pretty clear, like when I held it up earlier. So I'm just using some Ranger Multi-Matte Medium and just affixing that. And again, you want to be very careful because the acetate is slippery. So you try not to jiggle it too much. And I'm going to use some stamp blocks there to apply some weight to the card, and just doing a little bit of cleanup here while I'm going to go and pull a card base. Actually, I need to create a sentiment. So from the same stamp set, they have a bunch of label type sentiments. In other words, it prints like a block with a sentiment in there. And so I stamped this a few times so that I have a couple choices, and I'm looking at which one I like the best, and I'm just going to wing it with a pair of scissors and trim it out. Of course, if you're not comfortable using scissors, you could always use a paper trimmer. Pulling some Stampin' Up! Dimensionals to affix this to my card front, and I'm just going to peel that off and have that ready to go. Card base is a standard A2 card base, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm going to use some, what am I going to use? No, I thought I was going to use foam tape, but I decided instead, because there's a little bit of warping, that I don't need the foam. And besides, it would have been a pain to put foam just behind the mat, because I don't want to glue the main panel down of the stained glass. I want it to be a little bit raised from the card base to give it a little bit more of that stained glass look, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So we're just going to adhere that with that multi-matte medium. Again, use the blocks, and we're going to do some cleanup here. So in the amount of time that it took me to clean up, I think was enough time for it to be adhered well to the card base. I'm taking the sentiment now, just peeling off the backing and using a pair of tweezers to align it on the card. So remember, I flipped the panel around, so what you're looking at now is the back. That's why the image is flipped over. And that is the card. And if you look at it, it looks very dimensional. And that dimension is just strictly from the heating, so the slight warping, and then not adhering that to the card base. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this. I love the way this card turned out. I hope you did too. If you did like it, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment below, and until next time, happy crafting.